back to Political Misfits on Radio Sputnik, where we bring you news, politics, and culture. It's Wednesday, which means it's time for our weekly Follow Play Sports segment, where we look at the best and most of the worst from the world of sports. I'm Bob Schlehuber here with Michelle Whitty. Ugly sports week, Michelle. Real ugly for NBA All-Star Ben Simmons. A pretty good sports ruling at the Supreme Court, thanks to girls basketball coach Brett Kavanaugh. And later in the month, of Pride, Oakland Raiders football player Carl Nassib comes out as gay. Joining us this week to break it all down is Nate Wallace, founder and co-host of Redspin Sports. Nate, what's happening?
Hey, Michelle and Bob. Always glad to be back with y'all.
The shining star, Nate Wallace, back with us here. Let's start with the ruling at the Supreme Court. Nate, huge news this week for both its immediate impact and its long-term ramifications. The Supreme Court ruled unanimously Monday against the NCAA's limit on education-related perks for college athletes. Yes, until this ruling in the case of NCAA versus Alston, the NCAA did not allow unfettered access to education benefits such as scholarships for graduate degrees, paid postgraduate internships, and provision of free computers, musical instruments, and other types of equipment related to education for its athletes. The ruling itself was narrow, and it did not concern the question of paying students for their athletic prowess, but Justice Brett Kavanaugh, in a separate opinion, anticipated that as a next step and warned that the NCAA's business model would be flatly illegal in almost any other industry in America. Nate, tell us more about the ruling, its immediate impact, and to Kavanaugh's point, is the NCAA on the verge of having to dramatically change its business model?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot of debate about whether this really is kind of as revolutionary or earth-shattering as it seems on the surface. I think it is, but I think it's also important to note that this does not immediately make even name, image, and likeness the law of the land nationwide. That's still something that that Congress has failed to take up. You do have 6 states already. I think Florida, which was, I believe, Florida is going to start. It's going to become legal July 1, and then you have these other states like Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Texas, and New Mexico kind of follow suit because they want to. It's a recruiting sort of game in that regard. But what's really going on with this is interesting, because I really think that go back to 1984, which was really a watershed year and what really opened the floodgates in terms of the profits we see coming in now, the billions of dollars we see pouring in. We hear all the discussion about the college football playoff moving from 4 to 12 teams. The amount of money that comes in with that is going to be enormous. But 84 was the year in this University of Oklahoma case where the NCAA's monopoly over television rights was broken down. Used to be that on a Saturday, now there's a million games on. No, the NCAA got to actually select that and really tightly control that. And also these in what we're seeing now, it's interesting because you might think that it's just capitalism, free market ideology winning out over kind of protectionism. And that's one way to look at it, certainly. But I think that you got to kind of zoom it back a little bit and think about the cultural and social issues going on. The 84, before I do that, though, the 84 decision essentially, it took away the monopoly. And that's essentially what's got us to this state where then we have Sean Alston, the former West Virginia running back, pressing ahead with this in the wake of the Ed O'Bannon case, which took away the EA Sports NCAA football game without compensation for players, which can now come back actually with name, image, and likeness becoming illegal, at least state by state. But the issue with this is I really think there's also something to be said where the right wing in this country and there could be multiple reasons people came to the same conclusion. I think, though, the 3 liberal justices on the court, look at it, and I think they've evolved. They've heard the national discourse on this. They've seen that the old arguments about, you're just representing your university and it's not about the money, it's about the pride and playing for each other, that how exploitative that is, because it used to be a lot of liberals would hold that up as a model as opposed to the capitalist, jerks and jackasses trying to profit and all that. That it was somehow amateurism was that. And now it's I think it's the right wing justices and Brett Kavanaugh that was most intense in this ruling that he wrote and really going way further in the concurring opinion than what the other 8 justices went with in a 9-0 ruling, in saying that the NCAA has no standing, that amateurism is a sham. And he went and just demonstratively went through example after example after example. And I really can't separate the fact that the whole hatred that the right wing has of the NCAA for like its perceived like wokeness on social issues. I mean, it started off with like, banning NCAA tournaments in like Mississippi, South Carolina, when they wouldn't change the state flag in Mississippi or take the Confederate battle flag down in South Carolina in the 2000s. Then we had like the whole thing with like different, the Native American mascot stuff, issues of sexuality, gender and whatnot. There's this perception amongst the right wing that the NCAA is like a bastion of just like all these like sort of like social, identity politics sort of issues. And I think that's also it's sort of a confluent perfect storm of things for the NCAA.
Let me just read some of these. Gorsuch says he was unclear exactly what the NCAA sought in this appeal of the lower court ruling. He said if it is that the court should overlook restrictions on a monopoly because they happen to fall at the intersection of higher education, sports, and money, we cannot agree. And Brett Kavanaugh, concurring opinion with scorching, college presidents, athletic directors, coaches, conference commissioners, and NCAA executives take in 6- and 7-figure salaries. Colleges build lavish new facilities for the student athletes who generate the revenues, many of whom are African American and from lower income backgrounds, end up with little or nothing. For me, this is a libertarian streak. It's the justices here on the right saying, look, everyone in this country should not be restricted from making money, and anybody that's working, regardless of age, and then this is where like they're fine with like child labor, as long as they're getting paid, as long as they are also getting a piece of the pie, then everything is okay. And it's just so blatantly capitalistic and monopolistic of what the NCAA is doing here that you can get these justices to actually break down. What's interesting, I think, is that we so often kind of think of our justices as being direct projections of political parties. So just because Gorsuch and Kavanaugh are Republican appointees, that they're going to fall in line with Republicans. But I just think it gets a little bit more messy when you look at the law, Nate, than it is simply straightforward as like these are going to represent Republican interests. And so you can get something where they're like for labor rights, as well as that could be also attacking the NCAA for being like woke liberals. So you can have multiple things happen at once. It's not simply just like this team versus that team.
Oh, absolutely. And there's very different reasons for why like Sotomayor and Kagan and a Breyer would go along with the decision, as opposed to what a Kavanaugh is thinking. And we can't get inside their heads. And that's absolutely right. I mean, we've seen Roberts, break on the Affordable Care Act with the other, right-wing justices. So it's not like they're just like pigeonholed in that. That's certainly true. But I mean, the thing is, though, I think the discourse in society and just like the sheer like volume of people talking about this out there now is changed, because we used to get these rulings that would come down, and the NCAA had a history. This stuff was still extraordinarily egregious, a few decades ago. But it wasn't sort of like this. We have a new like kind of cultural zeitgeist kind of with regards to like the NCAA and amateurism. And there's just so many people in different cross sections of society, people that don't even follow sports, that kind of get that on a fundamental level, that it's hard to really, it's clear that that's affected the justices and how they ruled here. And NCAA, the arrogance, the hubris of them thinking that this could be like somehow, because this is about the Sherman Act and antitrust law, and the idea that they could exempt themselves literally on the argument that like the appeal of their sport, of the game, is based on people enjoying a product where like the athletes are not being compensated. I guess it's like romanticized notion that they're like playing for like the university and they're playing for each other, and they're not like, greedy professionals rolling around in Lambos and Rolls, and like, it's just ridiculous, man.
It'd be one thing too if like higher education in the country was free and like everybody was working together to promote education, and then maybe it'd be like, hey, as an athlete, maybe you can like give back and help us support future students and universal healthcare. I mean, like that's just not the ecosystem in which it revolves around, and so it has huge holes. Nate, I want to move on to some of the other sports stories of the week. I want to throw you some heaters here in the form of questions from the last week of the sports. You ready for them? You lose?
All right, let's do it.
All right, first up, as mentioned, the worst performance of the week was NBA All-Star and $33 million a year point guard Ben Simmons of the 76ers having a complete meltdown in the playoffs, having shot just above 30% from free throws, and he did not take a single shot in the fourth quarter of the last 4 games in their playoff series loss to the Atlanta Hawks. I feel bad in part, just sports psychology and somebody having a meltdown and to be the most hated player in all of Philadelphia. I mean, just got to be a lot. So I feel bad for the young person on some levels. On the other end, you paid a lot of money. You got a lot of coaches. You can obviously work on improving your shot. But my question here for you, Nate, will Ben Simmons be on the 76ers next year? And if the answer is no, what team will he be on?
No, and the Los Angeles Lakers.
Oh, Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, I just see something happening there. I mean, they could use him in a different kind of. They wouldn't have to feature him that way. The only thing is the amount of money he's on a max contract. So they'll have to figure that out. But Simmons is. I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, the guy's 6'10" point guard. I mean, he's one of the best defenders, like passers, just like absolute, like just an absolute freak. And he's only one like LeBron James on the open court. It's even comparable. So it's like, but he lost it. And it's like listening to the Fanatic, which is the main sports radio station in Philly a little bit the other day. I mean, wow. I had to turn it off. It was just like, I felt bad even like taking part in that, after a few minutes. It was that bad.
He's like 24. I mean, he's like a young guy to watch him. I always think of my boy, John Lester, the lefty, great pitcher, cannot throw to first base. Like he just has to roll the ball when he tries to throw will bounce forward. I mean, he was getting paid, I think, $23 million his last year to throw a baseball 60 feet straight in front of him. And yet he couldn't throw it 30 feet to his side. And so you just see these athletes. I mean, it's just humans. I mean, like, it's just remarkable to watch.
Like Chuck Knobloch had the same thing happen to him, I think, back in the day, too.
Man, those throws into the stands there at the end.
Yeah, wild.
Next up here, next fastball. I'm ready for the next heater here. A Ugandan Olympian tested positive for COVID-19 upon arrival in Japan. The first detection as athletes head to Tokyo. Uganda's team had all been vaccinated with AstraZeneca shots and tested negative for the virus before departures. Japanese media reported same fate fell to Chris Paul of the Phoenix Suns. The NBA was also vaccinated, but yet got COVID there. He's sitting out right now. But this Ugandan Olympian athlete, the first upon arrival with just 1 month. Nate, from today, the Tokyo Olympics are set to begin. Question here, will the Tokyo Olympics start exactly 1 month from today? And if yes, how many competing athletes will be sidelined due to COVID-19?
Yeah, it will start. And it's just because like they're not going to not start it, just about no matter what. I mean, I think that there's going to be more. I mean, but the thing is, there's just like an inertia with these things. And it's like things become almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's not as if like the actual facts and evidence of what's going on really like is what actually drives like these decisions. It's perception, sadly. And I don't see there being any slowing this train down right now. I mean, I was just at Yankee Stadium last weekend and I thought I had my vaccination card, thought it was going to be going in, had to show that and all, but no, they're not. You don't have to do any of that anymore. Mm-hmm. It's completely all open. And it's so they're going to be people sidelined for sure. And the Chris Paul thing, I mean, he's perplexed. I mean, he's like literally talked about how the only thing you can think about is how they have and they don't have no one wears masks at those games. You look at the Staples Center in LA, people are at the crowd. I mean, the crowds are back, but like people are all masked up for the most part inside, which is much different than a baseball outdoor stadium, I think. Yeah. But in Phoenix, they're packed in, no one wears masks. And I can't but think like when you listen to Chris Paul at his age, who's responsible, a family man going home just to practice game, go home to the family, that there's some kind of aerosol exposure that happened, while he was playing.
Or they're getting false positive tests. Like, who knows? Tokyo, the last headline I saw, banned alcohol for some reason. I don't think getting drunk gives you COVID.
You're like not allowed to, like, they're right now. I was listening to a BBC reporter saying he went to a game and like you're told you only can like clap. There's no like yelling or screaming.
No yelling, no clamping, no beer,
no drinking.
Just,
Oh. Wow. Yeah. This is wild. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's just a way to like pass the buck in terms of like responsibility. They know what's going to happen. So it's like, oh, well, they might not give you COVID, but it might make you do dumb stuff. So
it's just like there's this mentality that having a good time spreads COVID. Like we could just get away from this. If they put reasonable precautions in place in the beginning, then you wouldn't have to be like, you guys are having too much fun. It's dangerous.
Yeah.
Dangerous. Yeah.
Next up here. Las Vegas Raiders defensive lineman Carl Nassib became the first active NFL player in history to announce that he is gay. Big shout out to Michael Sam, who was openly gay and drafted, but yet did not play. What's up, people? Nassib posted on Instagram, I'm at my house in Westchester, Pennsylvania. I just wanted to take a quick moment to say that I'm gay. I've been meaning to do this for a while now, but finally felt comfortable getting it off my chest. He went on to say, I actually hope that one day videos like this and the whole coming out process are not necessary. But until then, I will do my best and my part to cultivate a culture that's accepting and compassionate. And I'm going to start by donating $100,000 to the Trevor Project. They're an incredible organization. They're the #1 suicide prevention service for LGBTQ youth in America. Nate, question here. It took a long time for the first, I guess, Michael Sam. Again, I don't want to skip over him. For him to come out, it took a while more for the first active roster male athlete in the Big Four American sports to come out as gay. How long will it be until the second athlete comes out?
A much shorter time. I mean, it's hard to overstate what a big deal this is because, the fear within it. I mean, going also within knowing and having talked to some people that, after the fact had come out and, having played major college football myself and just kind of been around this culture. I mean, there's just absolutely, while there's a lot of people who don't care and take the mindset that it's, it is what it is. There's like a cultural, there's a normalization that goes into like sort of it's drilled into you kind of within, especially hyper masculine spaces. I mean, but the wild thing is about that is I think we've made a lot of gains in the last 10, 15 years in terms of like the attitudes and like really the homophobia kind of dissipating, or at least make people, the culture changing to where people that still hold those views are afraid to go out and continue to act and say their kind of things and express themselves in the way that they used to, which is a good thing. I mean, I know when I played, it was like, one of the ironies of it is like college football or high school football, locker room and showers, it'd be like some of the, the gayest type activity. People would be in there, exactly. Joking around, throwing the loofah and stuff, playing, it's everyone's naked, it's like not what most people are doing in their everyday life, but yeah, it's like, oh man, don't call me gay, but I was seeing that start to break down. And I think it's good. I think Nassib is the perfect sort of, person for this because he's already established, unlike Michael Sam, who came out before the draft. And then also, I think the pressure of Sam coming out also weighed on him a little bit. He was like, he wanted to kind of like push forward and be really an activist on the issue. But I think I've heard him actually reflect on it, that it was kind of overwhelming to have to do both, I think, in some ways. And it kind of did take away from his focus on football a little bit, I think, and just in terms of everything else. But when you have Nassib, it's like he's already established. He's someone who's like already has a contract, right? He's got, he's not just on a first contract, he's on a second contract. 3 years, 25 million, I believe, with the Raiders. Last year was his first year of that. So he's got relative stability. And he also has he's also just a great personality. I remember him on Hard Knocks with the Cleveland Browns just a few years ago. And he was the guy that was like the money manager advice guy in the locker room on those shows that was telling everyone about how to save and different strategies and whatnot. And he's just a really dynamic individual who's really outgoing and just someone who's has an infectious type personality. And to have someone who's so comfortable, you really were struck by looking at the IG video, just how with someone coming out like that, it's the thing that kind of hurts a lot of people a lot of times in terms of people, a lot of the people that are the homophobic type stains, they'll say they're not homophobic. They'll say oh, we're just saying this because we know that that's what it's like in the locker room. So you're throwing out these things to put them into the discourse, saying you don't believe it, but you're just putting it out there because that's what they're going to have to deal with. But the reality is with Nassib is that he's in a space that's, I think, different. He's carved that out, and the confidence with which he came out, and just the sort of no big deal nature about it, I think goes a long way in terms of just I think also giving young people that are coming up playing the game and have been scared about this, an opportunity to overcome their fear.
Yeah, huge decision for him to come out and speak out. Nate, last question here. We got about a minute left here. An ongoing saga. As of Monday, Major League Baseball has now begun cracking down on unauthorized foreign substances with Major League pitchers. Major and minor league umpires have now started regular checks of all pitchers for tacky substances used to get a better grip on the balls, but can also increase the spin of the balls and make hitting them much more difficult. Some pitchers seem to get a chuckle out of it and are more than happy to comply, and others, shout out to Sergio Romo of the A's, seem rather irked by the lack of trust from Major League Baseball. Also, just if you wanted to go laugh at another video, Joe Girardi, the Phillies manager, and Max Scherzer getting into it last night with accusations and finger pointing. But Nate, big question here. We put some money on it here in the studio. How long until a player actually gets caught mid-game for having some type of tacky or sticky unauthorized foreign substance?
I can't imagine this. I mean, it's going to happen now. I mean,
no, Nate, this is the steroids. This is the steroid thing. Rafael Palmeiro, all these guys. It's not going to happen now. They're going to be smart enough to go back into the clubhouse, man. I guess maybe it's just there'll be some junkie out there who's a sticky stuff junkie. He can't help himself. Right? He's oh my god, give me the sticky stuff. Now you have a few bad starts in a row. It's a Sammy Sosa cork bat thing all over again. You get in your head. You're saying, man, if I could just get one good inning, a few good innings, I just need to get one win to get back on track. I just need that one hit. So the over-under, you can get in and out of here. The over-under is a month. What do you want to say? Over-under on a month?
I'm gonna go over. I'm gonna go over, and I'm gonna say Max Scherzer's head might explode before that happens.
We'll see which one's right. That's Nate Wallace, Redspin Sports. Nate, where can people go to find your great show?
Yeah, Redspin Sports. We got Chuck Modiano on from Deadspin tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Eastern time. So check that out. That's on our YouTube channel, Redspin Sports, on youtube.com/Redspin Sports, or just type it in. And then also, Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that good stuff. And at Twitter at Redspin Sports. And I'm at Socialist Jag. That is, Bob, the Jacksonville Jaguars, pun on that.
We know.
Not Judge Advocate General. So,
Socialist Jag and Socialist MMA today. Yeah, both of them on Twitter. Nate Wallace, we'll talk to you again soon, man.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a ton. Michelle, a few other headlines just to sneak in here before we head out of here. Deb Haaland launches review of devastating Native American boarding schools. The Interior Secretary announced Tuesday that she's launching the Federal Indian Boarding School Truth Initiative, a first of its kind comprehensive review of the devastating history of the U.S. government's policy of forcing Native American children into boarding schools for assimilation into white culture. It wasn't just the Canadians, after all. We were doing
never
it
said it was. 0 times have we said that was true.
Under the initiative, the Interior Department will investigate past boarding school facilities and sites, the location of known and possible barrier sites near school facilities, and the identities and tribal affiliations of children who were taken there. The effort also serves as a starting point for improving public awareness of the former policy, which most Americans never learned about in school, myself included.
Yep.
Other quick headline.
I mean, do we want to talk? We got Russian ships.
Jeez, yeah.
British ships in Russian waters.
In the Black Sea.
Real he said, she said situation happening there with the UK Ministry of Defense, as far as I can see, continuing to insist that no warning shots were fired.
Russia said we had to fire warning shots at this British trip as they entered into the Black Sea waters around Crimea.
With the UK saying we are passing through Ukrainian territorial waters. They were basically doing something like a Freedom of Navigation Act. They're using what they described as a sort of commonly used international transit. Russia disagreed. But it seems like British journalists on board the ship have confirmed that, there was a Russian jet, plane, whatever, and 2 Russian ships that came to intercept the British ship. The British Ministry of Defense press office continuing to say that the Russians must have just been undertaking an exercise and they gave warning to the British ship about what was going on. So, a lot of fingers being pointed there. But I mean, the BBC journalist on board the ship contradicts what the Ministry of Defense of the UK is saying. So
it says here the incident, if it happened, it would mark the first time since the Cold War that Russia used live ammunition to deter a NATO warship. That's not great for tensions between Russia and the West. I just wanted to say, Sean King, my goodness, Tamir Rice, his mother, the young boy killed in Cleveland in 2013 by police for having a toy gun. His mother has called out Sean King for fundraising off of her name and her family's pain. I mean, Sean King is a problem. That's all I got to say. Go check it out. Go support these people. Go just support families directly. Like, you don't need a middleman to go support families that are victims of police brutality. Like, do a little work, dig a little deeper on stories, but don't stop with Sean King, because story after story, and just to know the pain that these families go through, and to think that these national Twitter blue check mark people all of a sudden like raising money off of your family, that's sick. People already mad at this Intercept story from yesterday. About the training materials. There's people coming out saying, there's training materials that say socialists are terrorists. You're misinterpreting it. This has been publicly available for a long time. So keep an eye on that. I never trust the Intercept. No, I don't think so. I think I went down a little rabbit hole now looking at some of this source material, and it is just, just the idea lumping socialists and communists in with other groups that are commonly violent and have organized, terror cells in the United States is pretty silly. So I'm not mad at a story that says, look at who, again, we are insisting should be part of these groups that we should be very concerned about when it comes to violence in the United States. Yeah. And in New York, it looks like Eric Adams has the lead in the future of the city there for the next mayor that will replace Mayor Bill de Blasio. Eric Adams, can't wait to retire police to the officer. Golan Heights. Congratulations. Yeah. A man who would like to retire in the Golan Heights. Why? Possibly. I mean, this is Democrats, liberal Democrats in New York City, the most progressive city in America. Did you see Andrew Yang said he would, in his first year in office, he would not leave New York City except to go to Israel. Oh, I think you're going to say except to go to Times Square, just like its own little world within New York City. But Michelle, big thanks to Emily Satterwhite, Nick Cruz, Monica Cruz, not related, different spellings, and our good friend Nate Wallace for all hanging out with us today. Big thanks to Ryan, Dimitri, Andre, and Saul, and the entire Sputnik News team. Today's episode was produced by the very talented Jose Torres. On behalf of Michelle Whitty and myself, Bob Schlehuber, thank you for listening. Now get back to organizing.
Bye, everybody.